He's going to call in and kind of go over a little bit briefly, address what Jim just asked for, the kind of the goals and objectives of the overall plan. And then what I'll do is I kind of talked to Jim, looked at the plan, talked to John, kind of understand what they want to do, and I'll go over some options of how the city can move forward and do this plan.
Danny, do we have him on the phone?
Well, he said he was 5 minutes away, and that was 5 minutes ago, so let's see if we can, see if we can get him on.
Maybe he's moving there.
Not in Canada.
Is he on Vancouver time?
Yeah.
Well, I guess, just to kind of get everybody up to date, what we're trying to figure out here is our city's role on this Project Area Coalition plan. We pledged our support from the beginning, and we're here to see it through to the end, and we need to know what the next steps are. This is a big project for the city to take on. We haven't done many large-scale map amendments. I know I never have. Rex, maybe? Been a while. No? So this is a real big deal, and I think we're most pretty unfamiliar with the process, so we appreciate you coming out and putting our heads together.
Glad to.
I think it's, just having the workshop is a big step toward the goals that we have for developing MLK, Martin Luther King Boulevard on the north side. And you being here can give us some eye-opening of what we're looking at, and so that we won't be overwhelmed with a lot of stuff. Some things that we don't know, and I'm sure probably if you explained it to us, we still wouldn't understand, but that's why we got you here.
Yes. Yeah, I'd be glad to help you.
While we wait, I guess, I had a conversation with Mr. Vera earlier today, and I think one of the things that he's going to be bringing up today is the zoning and how do we want to go about that, whether it's an existing zone that we use or whether or not we create a zone that'll kind of fit the needs of this project. And I believe the advice you're going to give is that we would create a whole new zone, and that would increase density to whatever we feel is necessary, allow for residential up top, commercial on the bottom. So I think that's something that we all need to start thinking about, and we're going to need direction from the PAC on, what their needs are, and we can start maybe thinking about putting our own, maybe instead of mixed use, do a mixed commercial zone. We could look at something like that.
How would that be different than the mixed use we already have for the area around Reed Avenue, which allows commercial on the bottom and residences on the top?
You'd have to allow for, they're wanting more density than 15 units an acre, and that would be the major thing in the land use category itself, in the mixed use category, is to increase that density.
Okay.
And they'd have to tell us if it's 20 units or 25 units an acre, what they actually need. But that would be the primarily, the main difference in the land use category. And then my thoughts was, and I can show you real quick. Sure. This area is mixed use today. It's like mixed use category. And this is residential on both sides, and they call it a transitional zone. And this is industrial up here. So you have 3 different land uses that occurs in there. So what we'd have to do is we'd either, number one, change it all to mixed use. If they want to capture that whole area, then that way you could do, because they want to do a mixture of, based on their plans, they want to do a mixture of residential commercial in that transitional zone. And so it would have to be a mixed use category to allow that. And of course, the industrial to the north, we'd have to change that to either residential or commercial. Or
So
mixed use.
the same density in the transitional zone as in the mixed use zone that's there now?
Yes, sir.
So increase the density and all that.
Yeah, and what I would do is, one of the ideas to do it, because you're only mixed use category allows 15 units an acre. And the only other category that allows higher density is your high density residential, but it doesn't allow commercial. So we would have to create a new land use category.
So it sounds like to me, it's kind of like R1, R2, R3, we would do a mixed use 1, 2, and 3,
Exactly.
and do a step down as you get further away from MLK.
Yes.
Okay, that could,
And then we've got, of course, we're gonna have public hearings on it,
yeah.
and we're gonna, that's one thing I do see is the public coming out, even possibly wanting to expand it more into other areas, or not,
Yeah.
But I see more so's just because it makes the property more valuable.
Yeah, and the way to tackle the zoning, if we create a new mixed-use category, apply it to that area, then what we could do, instead of changing all the zonings, we could do an overlay district and apply the overlay district would sit on top of the zoning. And the overlay districts, the overlay district for this area, we didn't have a name, we had to name it something. It would show up on the zoning map as an overlay district, but in the land development code, it would have a set of regulations that would dictate control, because they want different setbacks, they want several different things that would be different from your other zoning categories, so that it would only apply, those conditions would only apply to that overlay district. And therefore, you could implement their plan through that overlay district. And give them the flexibility as that area redeveloped to be able to meet those requirements.
So what I've heard from them and reading in this is one of the primary things right now is increased density.
Yes, sir.
Is that correct, Danny?
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah, and we have John on here now, so we can kind of go through. John?
Yeah.
Okay, are you ready, Rick? You ready for John?
Mhm, yeah.
Okay, go ahead. All right.
If you can hear me, can you just say so I can see whether I can hear you guys?
We can hear you.
Yep.
Okay, good. So I can tell that you've been talking really. I apologise for the lateness. I was at a doctor's appointment with my daughter, so we got here. We're here. We're good. Everyone's happy at my end, so I hope you're okay with me. You would like me to introduce this program by explaining to you what it is we're trying to do? Is that what you would like me to do? Just tell me how you would want me to respond, and I'll start.
Sure. I think, we've all heard the presentation, but if you give us a brief summary of what we're trying to do here, and then we'll figure out, what the city's role is.
Right. Yeah, so I'll try and cut. I'm not going to go deep into the history, but all I would say about the history is that we first started talking about the need to, let's call it rezone Martin Luther King Boulevard back at the beginning of 2016, when a group of landowners set up the project area committee, which is now the Project Area Coalition because it's got more people involved in it. And that was to really rescue, if you like, the blighted community, and the fact that it was blighted, mostly because of the number of vacant lots that were in Martin Luther King. And this all followed up a finding of need and necessity back in maybe 2006, 2007, and an original master plan. So when we reviewed and updated the master plan in 2016 with help from the Community Redevelopment Agency and the Jesse Ball DuPont Foundation, who actually contributed to putting on 3 public meetings, one of the biggest priorities was the revitalization, specifically at the heart of the community, which is considered by the community to be Martin Luther King Boulevard. And much of that was done with the fact that once upon a time, Martin Luther King Boulevard was the commercial center of Northport, St. Joe, and was a busy, thriving place, serving all sorts of needs in the community. Quite a lot to do with the paper mill that was open at the time. This was in the 40s, 50s, early 60s. And also to do with the fact that there were services offered there like dry-stack cleaners that provided services for the whole community. Since Martin Luther King Boulevard has become less and less a vibrant place to the point at which it is now, the community has been concerned about the fact that they have lost a major part of what was and should still be the fundamental character of that neighborhood. So when we see how effective and how successful Reed Avenue, for instance, has been over the last 10 years. And I was quite struck by it. I left 10 years ago. I left Port St. Joe 10 years ago. And the change I see when I come back is frankly amazing. It's an amazing change. And thank goodness for that change. That's good for everybody. But what I didn't see was a change in Martin Luther King Boulevard, so I can understand exactly why the community feels that it's time to do something about that. And right from the beginning, in 2016, of the work that we did, we looked really at the deficiencies of the boulevard that are fairly well documented in the expression of need, the finding of need and necessity. For instance, the fact that there are very small lots in general on Martin Luther King Boulevard. They are not very deep, so it's very difficult to find a way of redeveloping those successfully, particularly to the present landowners who have in many cases got cleared lots that are adding absolutely no benefit to the community and are in fact to a certain extent lighting those lots around them that are not cleared. So we were looking right at the beginning, 2016, at the means at which things could be changed there. So that comes to why are we talking about a rezoning of Martin Luther King Boulevard? Earlier this year, or at the end of last year, in fact, I presented a plan for redeveloping Martin Luther King Boulevard, which all members of the Community Redevelopment Agency had a copy of. Hopefully still have kept their copies. There's also a website where all of this information can be found by anybody. And the website, it allows you to download all of the things that have been presented in terms of how Martin Luther King Boulevard can be improved. But I'm just going to focus on what is the purpose of rezoning. So the purpose of rezoning is that when we look at the tools that the community would normally have rezone any community, develop any community, we look first of all at land use. And the future land use map shows Martin Luther King Boulevard, 100 foot deep, either side of the street, with a future land use of mixed use. But then when we examine what the mixed use land use allows a developer or an investor, whatever you want to call them, people who want to do something with their empty property, when you look at that, it has some things which are limiting. The first limiting factor, and the one which we would like to see changed in any form of rezoning, is the 15 dwelling units per acre density, which we feel is too much of one size fits all. In other words, it doesn't give enough flexibility, it doesn't actually give enough dwelling units per acre when one is dealing with relatively small lots to make a development worthwhile. And in detailed terms, you can see, a whole range of lots that we took and we put on the ground, in a kind of an experimental way to see how many lots would be yielded by a development that would be typical of a typical mixed-use area. One level on the ground level retail, and above that up to 3 levels of apartments or living accommodation. When we did that, we saw that the density required would be considerably more than 15 dwelling units per acre. This is still staying within the kind of parameters that you would expect to see on a redeveloped lot in a community such as Port St. Joe. In other words, reasonable setbacks and so on and so forth. That led us to look at the height limitation. We proposed that the height limitation would be increased from 35 feet, which I think is what it is at the moment, to 60 feet, which is more in keeping with what would be required for a project which had retail on the ground floor and, as I say, three levels above it. maybe 2 levels of bar bed with a roof that is more decorative or something like that. All this was in response to the community's desire to see a street that had this kind of profile. And that was why we focused on this kind of program which had one over retail and ground floor and residential above. Not least because we saw the opportunity coming down the pike, which is the development of the port. We saw the opportunity to create a potential for, let's call it workforce housing, an element of workforce housing, things for younger people, the opportunity to include affordable housing as part of the development, and so on and so forth. But what we wanted to do was to fulfill the mixed use rules, but see them adapted to allow something a little denser. So those 2 elements, the height limitation and the dwelling units per acre, we wanted to, in effect, renegotiate those. Then when it came to building the boulevard's infrastructure, which is obviously an incredibly important part of all of this process, we looked at what the problem was right now, which is fundamentally a sidewalk which is not large enough, not wide enough. It's only 5 feet wide at the moment, not wide enough to provide what I would call comfortable space outside a retail shop. And so we started to look at how that could be changed by adjusting, the limitations that they are at the moment. So we looked at that, the infrastructure, the improvement of the alley services. Some of these are not so important from a rezoning point of view, but they all manifest themselves as a kind of singular approach to Martin Luther King Boulevard for moving forward. The thing that we were most interested in doing, frankly, was to preserve the current mix on the Martin Luther King Boulevard. And what I mean by that is that not the whole street has a solid commercial mix. The commercial core of the street ran from Avenue A to Avenue D, and from Avenue D upwards, the centre of the street was more residential. We wanted to preserve that. We didn't want a one-size-fits-all mixed use without somehow preserving the residential element and the retail element independent of each other. So that's when we started to talk to Marina Pennington, who was at the time the your planning consultant, and she suggested the use of overlay districts. In other words, maintaining the mixed use underlay that's there at the moment, the future land use, and then overlaying that specific standards and targets for the properties in, first of all, an overlay district that emphasizes retail running from Avenue A to Avenue D, and secondly, a residential type area that focuses on the residential element but still allows a level of commercial use in, say, live-work units, if lots there were to be reorganized and rebuilt. And so therefore preserving this sense of neighborhood. The third district that we identified the need for was something that was prompted to me by a question of one of the members of the staff at the city, and that was, well, what about the surrounding neighbourhoods? How do you step down either side of Martin Luther King so that you don't swamp the surrounding neighbourhoods with large buildings? So that's where we created a third element, or a third district, which is a district which is transitional. It's designed to allow a landowner to develop with a reasonable amount of density on Martin Luther King, but they have to step down from a height that might be somewhat higher on Martin Luther King Boulevard to a more residential height as you move away from the boulevard. And that, I think, is best seen on a map. It's very difficult to describe, but it's best seen on a map. And that's the purpose of the districts. And what we're trying to do now is having had our plan approved. The first plan that was approved by the Community Redevelopment Agency was the updated master plan at the end of 2016. The second plan that was approved was the redevelopment of Martin Luther King at the end of 2017, beginning of this year, 2018. And specifically, we asked Community Redevelopment to send all of the tools that we've constructed within the community forward to the city for you all to review it and to enter into a rezoning process. That is kind of where we are now. It's passed now to the city. The tools exist. The tools are all available to everybody, but specifically I make them available to the planning consultant, Ray Greer, who I know is with you at the moment. And the intention now is to start to move forward and see if we can start to bring this whole zoning process together so that the benefits that we're talking about, that we believe are essential, can be talked about openly, discussed, adjusted, amended, fixed, fixed in whatever way we have to fix it in order for this to be made into law, so to speak, and moving and help move us forward. So what I am expecting for us to do today is understand what the process is as we move forward, conscious of the fact that it's absolutely essential that the residents, especially of North Port St. Joe, but anywhere, are able to have access to this information, understand why it's been put together in this way, and understand what we're doing to try and restore the commercial and mix of commercial with residential on a street that at the moment has so many empty lots and is frankly such an amazingly different experience to the bustling, hustling of Reed Avenue, and frankly, you know, the wealth that's being built there. We want to see the ability to turn Martin Luther King into a community, into a street that also generates wealth, and, you know, basically raises the quality of North Port St. Joe neighbourhood in every single way that we possibly can, and reinforces its personality, and reinforces, its culture and its history. And in that way, it complements the things that are going on elsewhere in Port St. Joe. It has benefits to the whole community, and it really realizes the opportunities that are growing all around Port St. Joe and in Gulf County at the moment. Things that everyone can see as they come to this community after being away for a while. And I'm talking about the whole of Gulf County, the whole of the Gulf Coast at the moment. On top of that, of course, the opportunities we want to plug into at the port, and there are other opportunities which, if the port doesn't manifest itself, we aren't going to wait around for it to do that. We want to be able to offer facilities for the increasing number of people who want to visit Port St. Joe and stay there. We want to offer food opportunities for people who want to eat in Port St. Joe and stay there while they're staying there, as well as for local people. We see this as an opportunity. The whole place has an infrastructure already, but it needs renewing. The community's intent to complete its application for the Triumph Fund money to support the improvement of the infrastructure, but it needs a level of zoning which is suitable to modern day development and which is going to attract investment. And that's the reason we're doing this, and that's the reason we're here today, and that's why we want to keep proceeding with the zoning process so that it can be made public and addressed accordingly.
All right, thank you, John.
Thank you, John.
Does any commissioner have a question for John before he takes off? Anyone in the audience? need to speak or have any questions at this point for John? All right, John, if you want to stick around in case any come up.
Yeah, he'll stick around.
Okay.
Yeah, yes, for sure.
So I guess the question at this point is, where do we go from here? He said it, we're at a point now where we have to take the next step.
Sure.
Take it from there.
And the next step would be to work out a land use category for this property. And, it sounds like that transition zone might not need 20 units an acre.
Yeah.
And so that might, if they do want a mixed use based on their plan, of a mixed use, so we would have to, maybe what we could do is create a new mixed use category in the existing mixed use area. And in the transition zone, which is residential today, is put the actual mixed use you have today over there. So do it all in one land use amendment. And then what we do, we still do the overlay district for the zoning. So the overlay district would sit on top of that entire area, and we can control everything through the overlay district. And it would be established in the land development code.
And when you say an overlay district, that can only make it more strict? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it would actually override the underlying zoning. And so it would apply to that area only. It'd be named, and it'd in the land development code, it'd have a section in there that set the parameters for it. And it actually would implement what they want to do for their plan.
Okay.
I think our decision's probably gonna be, the units per acre, of course, and then height. That's it. Right, and the height, so we'll all have to decide that.
How many stories can you get out of a 60-foot building? 4?
They're asking, I think, a commercial on the bottom and then 3 additional.
So 4 stories?
4.
And we allow now 35 feet? That's a pretty substantial increase in height.
Ray, let me ask you a question.
Yes.
Once we decide all this, we come up with a template that we want to put out to the public. Where do we go from there? What is our responsibility as far as
For the city.
notifying property
Yeah.
owners,
I would-
surveys? Do we do surveys? Whose responsibility is it, the developer or the city? That's kind of where I'm
Well,
a
and
little confused.
If the city takes it on, then it becomes a city-initiated process. And, I work for you.
Yep.
So you can direct me what to do. This goes both ways. Sometimes the developers, they do this process and they take it through.
Right.
The next step, if the city was to move forward and say the city wants to see the future land use change and the zoning changed, then what I would do is do the notices. You do have to notify all these property owners.
Right.
And of course, you want them, and I've told Jim this, well, we've done this before. We do these land use amendments and overlay districts in these areas, like around a downtown area or a redevelopment area. And one of the things that we do is notify them all. And a lot of times, it depends on the local government, they'll make the individual landowners sign an application stating that, they're in agreement with it to change their land use and their zoning on the property. Because that would be you have a lot of parcels there, so that would take a little time right there.
Yeah.
And you could be doing that could be ongoing as we're preparing everything else.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes, sir. To the commissioners, my main concern right now is whether the basic infrastructure that exists right now, could it handle that change?
And that's the number one question on my page here, and unfortunately, we don't have John to answer, but Jim, you might be able to give us some input on, do we have enough current infrastructure to handle an increase in density?
Yes.
First thing we need to know is units per acre. That would be the first question. Once we have that, then yes, we can look at that and tell you that answer.
If you had to just off the top of your head, at 25 units per acre, do you think our sewer system and water is sufficient at this point, or would it take improvements?
I'm not sure. Everything right now is based on the current land use code of 15 units per acre, so we are sufficient on what we have now, but definitely we would want to, with any kind of improvements or changes to land use on, you want to look at it.
So there's going to be some engineering costs just to determine whether or not we can handle 25
I would
units.
definitely have our engineers take a look at it and tell us what our flows would be, those type of things.
I would almost suggest that we work backwards and find out what we can handle before we entertain an idea of what they want, you know what I mean?
Probably a good question, Nathan.
Yes, absolutely. That was my point. And that be the case, I think the basic infrastructure should be looked at first. You know what I mean? Yeah. Okay.
We have a lot of new water lines in place, we're working on sewer lines, so a lot of those things are there, but they're based on the current density that we have now, so I would definitely have our engineers.
Well,
look
and
at
I
that.
think I heard Mr. Henry say that they were going after Triumph money for infrastructure.
There was an application that we
Okay.
put in, and we're gonna resubmit that application. The key here, though, is as it exists right now, even with the existing infrastructure and the density you've got, you're not gonna be able to attract the type of investment that's required to move that community forward. So, you know, there's gonna have to be some investment, from somewhere
Sure.
to make this happen. So we can't be naive and think that we leave it like it is now, and it'll be like this the next 25 years, based on the fact that we don't have the infrastructure in place. So we need to get realistic about it. Do we want it to stay the same, or do we want to try to come up with ways to improve that area? And if it requires putting some money into infrastructure, we need to figure out how to do that.
So what you're saying now, Danny, is based on what you foresee in the future, your opinion is we don't have the infrastructure in place that's gonna handle that?
Not sure, based on what the density is gonna be, like Jim said, you know, we gotta find out what's that gonna be before we can determine, you know.
And how fast the growth is.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
But I would hate to zone an area that isn't ready for it, you know? You gotta put the pipes in before you lay the road.
No doubt.
I think once you got an idea of that density and what you got a rough idea of what you want to be in there, then our engineers can definitely, you know, they are, yeah.
And there's 15 units per acre, there's 15 impact fees per acre too.
What's tricky too is when you get the heights, because if you look at bigger,
As far as infrastructure is concerned, look, I think it's absolutely essential, right, that the neighborhood of North Port St. Joe, the city, and as well Gulf County come together and work out the best way of eliminating blight here. And if that means it's got to be a coordinated process, but it also needs an integrated process. In other words, let's work out how we match our need for infrastructure, which clearly needs to be done on North Port. So there's no doubt about the fact that the infrastructure in certain areas, you know, certain elements of the infrastructure need to be renewed. But that requires everyone coming together, the city, the county, and the neighborhood itself, and really working out a coherent and integrated plan for this. What I would be disappointed in seeing is if we simply look at the current infrastructure and say what are its limitations, and let's work down to those limitations. That's a very negative way of approaching things. It might sound realistic, but it's negative. The most positive thing that can happen is that while there is Triumph funding available throughout the part of the Gulf Coast, we should be putting together a coherent, integrated plan that lays out why we need infrastructure support in order for us to allow this community to function far better than it is at the moment, and frankly, contribute a much greater share of the taxation than it does at the moment. And that taxation only arises from the improvement of properties, particularly empty properties. This needs the support of everybody. You know, we shouldn't be looking at it as simply saying it's up to the community to do this, it's up to the city to do that, it's up to the county to do this. We want everyone to come together on this and work out in a very positive way, how do we fix this? And that's all I'm asking.
And John, I'll speak for myself, Commissioner Ashbrook, that absolutely, I think that from the very beginning, I said that the city's role in this is going to be to take care of the infrastructure of this project. That is our role, and the first and foremost on my list of to-do is to determine if our current infrastructure can handle it based off of 25 units per acre. And once we get that figure and figure out what the scope of work will be to make that happen, then we have to go after funding sources. But we don't know what size pipes we need.
Correct.
Yeah, okay, good. No, yeah.
And just want to say to John, this is Nathan Peters. You know, you and I talked the last time you was here,
John, can you hear him?
and
Yeah.
All right, go ahead.
the subject that we talked about was get the infrastructure in first. We talked about that
Yeah.
at some length because it's important
Yes.
that we have that first. right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
We do need the infrastructure, yeah,
Okay.
but it has to be part of an overall plan. We must always tell ourselves that. You know, when we go to the Triumph Fund, Mr. Peters, when you and I go to the Triumph Fund and we say to them, you know, we need our community restored, and the best and infrastructure is the most important part of that. We need to show them that there is an overall plan for this. This isn't just throwing money away and sidewalks, which for you and I, Mr. Peters, is not an issue. You need sidewalks outside your new investment in the community that are significantly better than the ones that are there at the moment, unless they've replaced them all since we met. But, you know, we know that when people have the good infrastructure, they feel safe, they feel they want to come back to the place, and they feel they want to spend their money there. And frankly, that's what this is about. Making Martin Luther King Boulevard a vibrant commercial centre once again. And you're dead right, the infrastructure needs to lead with that, but it all has to be part of the big plan. We've got the components of the big plan. We have the components. We've just got to keep putting them together, examining them and seeing how best to move forward. Or put it this way, making sure we're really clear in our strategy and that the world knows we're clear, and then investors will come looking confidently at the property there and saying, yeah, we want to be involved with this. We want to be involved with this. This is a forward-looking community. We want to be involved. They're working with their city. They're working with their county. They know what they want. They know what infrastructure they need. They know the kind of people they want to see come and open businesses here. They know they want their local business owners to flourish. We know they want their local community to get jobs here. This is something we want to be part of. That means we've got to talk about this thing as a whole. At the same time, recognising that it's got to be phased, which is what you're suggesting, Mr. Peters. That's exactly what you're suggesting, isn't
Yes,
it?
sir.
Because it's got to be phased, right?
All right, so what I've got so far, determine the infrastructure needs, determine a funding source, start working towards that. At the same time, simultaneously, we need to determine and create a new zoning category that'll fit the needs.
Future land use.
So we do that, what's the next step? Once we create the new zone?
But we can create the right for future land use category, prepare the zoning category, the zoning overlay for it. Do the notices. I would definitely notice everybody, and it's up to you if you'd want to require them to sign an application or not to allow for the land use change and the rezoning on their properties. And then we take it to the planning board. The land use amendment goes back to the city commission. Of course, from there, it has to go to the state to be reviewed. The overlay district will come and meet at the same time as you come back for adoption. You can adopt it. The overlay would have to be adopted, by the city commission by ordinance through 2 readings. The land use amendment, of course, have to review, would come back and be adopted by the city commission.
Would it be your recommendation to get everyone to sign those?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you're going to need buy-in, since we're going to considerably change that residential area if we create a mixed-use category through there. It definitely will change that.
I think it's a good idea to get applications out to the people and let them, you don't want them to think that we're doing something behind the back.
And show them, we can send a map and a application form to sign.
And if we choose to do that, does statute dictate a cutoff of, hey, if 60% of the people say, whoa, pull back, is that statutory or is it up to us at that point?
No, in the land use itself, you can change, the city can change through a city-initiated land use amendment. You can change the future land use by public notices. Sure. Publishing it in the newspaper, that's a public notice. You do not have to notify the individual landowners. That's totally up to the local government. And the zoning's a little different. The state law requires you notify the landowners to change their zoning. And we're not changing the underlying zoning category, we're dropping an overlay on top of it, which will add additional requirements for it. So I would recommend, yes, that you do have them sign. Yeah. I mean, you don't want, this is a platted subdivision too, so you don't want to change the overall land use and zoning and then have somebody, 2 or 3 people in the middle of it, they're not for it. I mean, if that's going to be an issue, we probably need to work that out before we change the future land use on the whole piece.
I've got 3 things. everything's on my list that we need to be working on.
Okay, so I guess,
No, go ahead, Jim.
no, I was just trying to think it through too on there, so I guess we've got to figure out what that letter's gonna say on there. I guess we got to figure out what we're proposing to.
Yeah, we need to do 1 and 2 first.
We need to know
Determine what's
what the
going on the letter.
density
That's
is, because once we figure out the density and the heights on there, then we could have a task order for Mr. Greer. You could have one for your engineers to review capacity on your water and sewer, and you could actually get something together for your actual individual property owners, I believe. is what you gotta do. So it sounds like we've got to figure out what we want to present, that way we can get it out for everybody to review.
And we could do a workshop too, and have them come and explain what the letter is and what the zones are, and how that would affect their property.
And
The city proposes to adopt.
Yes.
Just what's on this map, basically. Have a copy of that probably in each letter and explaining what it's all about.
Yes.
And then have a workshop and, just go from that.
Exactly. Everybody could come, and anybody that had questions.
But, I mean, as you can see there, I don't know how many property owners are there, but it's,
It's quite a few.
3 or 4 dozen.
You got people that own multiple properties there too.
Oh, yeah.
So just to get started then, if we need to determine infrastructure needs, where do we go? Do we talk to Clay? Do we talk
Well, I
to?
think first we got to determine what kind of proposed for the density and the height. because
I
that's
would
the
say
two big
based off
things.
of 25.
Based off of 25?
That way, I mean, if we get less, I'd like to know if we can accommodate the request. We can always cut back.
With a height of 60 feet?
I would say let's shoot for what they're
Yeah,
asking.
I'd do that, and then if we have to back off, we'd have to back off.
So it sounds like what we could do from here, then staff could work with Mr. Greer and work with it to get you a task order from Mr. Greer and get one from Dewberry, what it would take for them to be able to give you those numbers. So what I'm hearing back.
And I think that's gonna be another big issue is, we're a city government that works with a pretty small admin budget, and I don't know what this is gonna cost. Do you have any idea in your head of what these task orders would cost, and what, just your time alone, what's that gonna come out to, ish?
Yeah, I'd
No,
prepare
no.
proposal to figure out the time.
And we're gonna have engineering fees in there. Right, not a whole lot right off the bat, but I mean, it's gonna take time for him to figure it out.
Mr. Bolden, is there any help from the CDC on issues like that, or?
No, not at this time. We were really focusing on our application,
Okay.
trial application, and so we don't have any resources that we can put into it.
I mean, we can move on this, but we can only move as fast as the dollar will let us.
We understand. Better than nothing right now. I mean, the other thing too, we want to make sure the public is aware and educated to this process, because this is new. And, nothing has changed for years over there. So now all of a sudden we're talking about making change. So we need to make sure that there's some informational briefings and opportunity for the community to hear exactly what we're doing rather than just springing it on them, okay?
I think that's a great idea.
Sure. And I mean, some of the high points on this, I think, I can't remember who I spoke to about this, but, keep in mind, we have a dying CRA in Northport St. Joe because the tax base is $1 million below zero. We start popping businesses up, all of a sudden, MLK is self-sufficient. They're starting to bring in hundreds of thousands of dollars a year that they can receive in that
Sure,
area.
absolutely.
So I think the timing is perfect.
Yeah.
It's still a fairly new CRA, and it's going to be exponential gain in revenue as businesses start to open up.
And the CRA can also reimburse the city after that occurs.
We'll let you know when I have some money.
You gotta build something that makes it happen, the tax base over there.
Well, and not only that, David, it's important that we get that extension, 10-year extension.
Yes.
For the CRA, or after 19, there won't be one if we don't get the extension.
That's right.
So we've applied,
So
we're
now-
going through the process of that.
Are we talking about the CRA that's for the downtown area now? You're talking about the one
It-
for St. Joe? Because I think they're two separate ones.
No, it includes,
No,
but
no,
it
they're two separate
includes
ones.
that.
Commissioner Bezet, though, didn't we started a brand new CRA in Northport St. Joe?
Yeah, it's new, that's totally separate.
That wasn't it's not connected to the other
No,
CRAs.
they're two
I
separate
think it
CRAs.
is. I think it is.
Do you know the answer, Jim? Is it connected?
They are two separate
They are two
boundaries.
separate.
The
But right
bound-
now, the only funding for the expanded boundaries in Northport St. Joe is coming from the
Right,
existing.
but they are two separate
They are two
CRAs,
separate.
with both having 30-year experience.
So hypothetically, if the current CRA that's making money now goes away. If it doesn't get renewed,
Mhm.
what happens to the CRA that was formed in 2006 in Northport St. Joseph?
It's still in place,
But it won't have our funding
but it
source.
won't have the $20,000 a year that y'all have.
Okay.
But that's the only
That's
thing
what
that would be lost.
Yeah, that's what I thought, it was two separate
That's the way I
applications.
Yeah.
understood.
I understood it just to be a expanded boundary under everything.
No, it actually went through the whole process of having its own finding of necessities and everything to make it a 30-year CRA for that expanded area.
I'm
you
glad,
know, for St. Joe.
I'm glad, I
Okay.
don't want your funding to go away.
Well,
Do we have any other questions for anybody? I mean, I think, do we want to have staff go ahead and start looking at the infrastructure? What that's gonna cost in the task order?
I think what we need to do, it sounded like the directive for staff was to get a task order back to you from Mr. Greer and from Dewberry, and I can get that to y'all and tell us whether y'all want to yay, nay, what you want to do with it, and then that'll get your answers for your infrastructure, and then you'll know what it'll take to do these land use changes.
Would you need to vote in a regular meeting to ask you to do that?
I think just have to vote on the task order, because we're not costing any money to just have them look into
Just ask us.
what it would cost.
But no, before that moves forward, yes, sir, we would need it. So I'll work on getting those to you. As soon as I get them, I'll get them before the board for your approval.
Do we want to include proposing or getting a task order on proposing a new zone that we were talking about with the with the overlays as well?
I think, yes, I think that's what the task
Yeah, it
force
would
would
be-
come from.
Okay, so my 1 and 2 would be taken care of with that, okay.
That would be for him to take care of the whole process for you.
And once that's determined, we notice the landowners, and then we see what's next.
If we proceed, we do that.
And the land use amendment itself, once you got it noticed, we got it all worked out, we did the workshops, and you're ready to move forward, once it went through the planning commission, went through the city commission, we can then take it, put it through the state, we can do an expedited review request. It's about a 3-month period to do the land use through that process. And so we'd be back, within 3 months with the adopted amendment, bring it back in front of you to adopt with then the overlay district for adoption. So that could happen, total about 5 months it'd be done. So it'd be done by the end of this year if you started this summer.
Anyone else have any questions at this point from the audience, commissioners?
Just one other question. How many acres we talking about, Danny? That's one question for him to put that task order together. But you're talking 25 acres or 18?
18 acres.
18.
hold on, you said 18, right?
Yeah, I found it, I asked John that.
Oh, he said you asked him already. Ray said 18.
18 acres, okay. So now,
Okay, we're
Yeah,
good.
he's got it on the bottom of one of the.
Okay.
And I've just got a couple random questions I was writing down while we were speaking. Zoning is not something that I do every day. Commercial office space, does that constitute a dwelling unit? Could you have a office building downstairs with 12 offices? Does that count towards the 25 units per acre?
No, it does not. Yeah, it's not. The residential only applies, the density.
If you're living.
Only applies to a residential unit. Yeah.
And then the last thing I have, what would the anticipated setbacks be? Are we going to have 0 lot lines in that transitional zone, or is that going to have?
Yeah, I'd have
setbacks?
to look at their plan to see exactly what they're proposed, but yeah, they do have, the commercial corridor would be.
On setbacks, just to be clear about setbacks, the proposal focuses on the setbacks required to widen the street. And there are numbers, very clear numbers about what that is. We worked out, I think, trying to create a 13-foot pavement, grandfathering in, of course, any existing buildings. They would, they use the setbacks that are already there. Like, for instance, Mr. Peters, a restaurant and apartments, they're already in place. So they would be, using the setbacks they've already, right? They exist. But any new building would be to a specific setback that would allow the frontage of the retail to be, reasonably wide. Not quite as good as national standards, but close. And that's very clearly stated and drawn in all the documentation that's available. It's very, very simple and straightforward.
So that'd be more of like a downtown,
Sure.
T&D style.
Yeah, it would be, the 0 lot lines on the lot line coming up to a setback so that the retailer has actually got a decent piece of space in front of their retail store. and it's not cramped and so on and so forth. And it, you know, and it's not a safety problem.
Well, John, I'll only ask you one thing. Please don't create another parking problem for the city.
Maybe he can help you with it.
Well, yeah, this is the chance to do it properly, right? So if you recall, I don't know if you recall actually, we do have plans in there with every parking space identified, and there's a map that shows that on all of the land that we're talking about. So you know, a lot of on-street parking, but if we're able to get individual owners to start to join their lots together, that would allow probably a good deal of off-street parking as well. But you know, parking is an issue, as we know, and it's one of those things that is going to have to be talked through very carefully.
All right. Any other questions? I think we've got marching orders. Go ahead, Mr. Peters.
Yeah, one other thing I want to sort of make clear, and that's you know, the PAC has been overseeing this project, and one thing I don't completely agree with is that you talked about people that landowners on Martin Luther King, both sides of the street, got to be eventually notified, and they're going to be signing some papers. Well, the PAC has not called any of those people to a special meeting. It should be a special meeting called just for the property owners. Now, they have had some meetings at a church, and it was open to the entire community. And should the people on Martin Luther King feel special for some reason? They're the one that got to sign off, really. So what I'm saying is that it needs to be a special effort to call a special meeting. And I don't care if don't but half of them come, a third of them come, call the meeting. Give them an opportunity to be there.
Sure.
And if they don't be there, then you can say they didn't come.
And I don't see any reason, Mr. Peters, why we couldn't do the same thing we did notifying people about the golf carts. If you own a golf cart, you should be at the meeting. If you own a home
That's right.
property, you
That's
should
exactly
come to
right.
the meeting.
Yes.
I would add to that, though, if you're gonna have that meeting, you should have Mr. Greer here, so that when people do have questions, he can address those questions and be a part of that discussion, okay?
Sure.
Okay?
Because when I go and talk to other property owners on Main Street, I talk to Mr. Clinton. And I said, what you heard on it, I hadn't heard anything on the situation. Have you received a letter from the PAC to a special meeting to discuss this? No. Mr. Dresbach said the same thing. So let's get people informed so we can know what's going on. You know what I mean?
In defense of the PAC, though, the PAC always makes their announcements to the public. Mr. Clemens has been to meetings before. He was a part of the initial meetings that we have. We send out those, and his wife is on our email list. Those folks, we constantly send out information about the meeting. So it's not that the PAC hasn't been informing folks, but in this position where we're at now, sure, it's time to bring everybody in. But we need to make sure Mr. Greer is here.
But I'll
so that
say,
we can
I'll say
report
to both of you that
Yeah.
that is one of the hardest things that I think
Yes.
we have to do up here is to, how do you notify everybody? Not everybody's on Facebook, not
No.
everybody reads
No.
the Star.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
but everybody has a mailbox.
Yeah, we do it through
If
the- we do it
affects-
through
if
the
it affects
churches and-
people,
Sure.
if it affects a targeted group of people that live on that street, then I think we can make an extra effort.
Absolutely, we can do that, that's fine, but like I said, it's not that, as far as the process has been going on, people in the community have been given notice on it, and some of the folks who initially started coming, you know, a lot of this is work. This is not just, you know, sitting in a meeting, you have to actually engage your mind and actually do some work in this. So where we're at now, I think this is a great time to bring everybody in, but we need to have the experts there, because we're at a point now where we need to have people to understand where we're going forward.
Understood. All right.
There has not been a special meeting for the property owners on Martin Luther King.
Well, I will tell you this, Mr. Peters, if I'm still sitting here
Yes, sir.
and we get these task orders back and we decide to move forward with it, we will consult with the
Yes, sir.
homeowners.
Yes, sir.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think we all agree with that.
Yes.
This is going to substantially impact the value of these people's property, which will substantially impact the taxes that they pay. And so I think it behooves me to want to send them a letter and say, hey, this is going on. So,
Well, I hope it don't look like Japanese, you know, when they
sure.
do.
It has an MSR one time.
Any other comments?
It has an MSR one time, looked like
Japanese,
Japanese.
that's right. Just always notice, okay?
All right. If there's nothing further, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion.
All right.
Adjourn. Thank you.
Thank you.